Greetings, fellow Path of Exile fans. So I've been playing this game for a while now, and I usually like to try and do some crazy things each league. Like the last league, I tried to make a max AoE character, which should be the highest ever made in standard once I get around to making a video of it. And one league I maxed out tooltip DPS to see how high over 1,000,000 I could get it, etc, etc. In this league, I've decided to try to one-shot as many bosses as I possibly can, if not all the bosses in the game. So how are we going to do that? Well, of course we are going to use Vol Righteous Fire. There's a few different ideas I was toying around with before the league started, like some Detonate Dead shenanigans and things like that. As you can see there, I just used Vol Righteous Fire with no links on it, and I got Vol in Dried Lake. I was just doing some testing and show you kind of the introduction here. When you use a base Vol Righteous Fire, of course, you're going to deal damage equal to, at level 20, like 120% of your life and energy shield pool, which right now it's about 11 or 12k. It's 11k, that part. And so just base with 11k life and ES, you're going to have that times 1.2 base damage, which is about as high as it gets in the game. There's a few other ways that I might toy with later on. Here I'm going to use Vol Discipline to end up getting the base up to 15k, which right now for the first part of the series, that's going to be about as high as it gets. And you can see there I did a little bit over half of his health with all my increased damage mods. So now let's talk a little bit about how we're going to scale this up to actually start one-shotting. Okay, so if we look at what we've got here, I'm going to be using Vol Discipline every time to boost my pool up to 15k total. Right now, if you look, it's 1700 life and 94 shield, which is again about 11,000. Once I use this, that adds about 4,000 shield on top of it, gives me 15,000. Now, Vol, if we just start by looking at PoE DB, of course there's going to be a lot of math involved here, which I enjoy math. Hopefully you do too. And eventually, once I get, right now I'm just going to give a quick little intro on how we'll sweep through the first like 7 tiers of white maps, and then eventually I'll go into detail on how we're going to try to scale this into the millions. So for now we only need like a few 100,000 damage for each shot to one-shot most of these bosses. So if we start with 15k base damage, the first thing I'm going to point out is Pain Attunement. So Pain Attunement is always going to give us this 30% more spell damage when on low life multiplier. Vol Righteous Fire just always triggers this. So as soon as I waste through this and end up at 1 life, I will be on low life and I will get the 30% more spell damage multiplier. Okay, now the first thing that you want to do is obviously just maximize the increased modifiers for damage. So if we look here, we've got this little cluster right here, which is like 50 increased. We've got some here. We've got this whole string along the shadow line. That's like 120 when you total that up. Some area increased here, and some over here. And whenever I totaled all that up, I came up with around 400-ish percent. I've also got a couple of rare jewels, like here and here, which those end up giving me about 75 increased. And lastly, on the equipment, I've got a nicely rolled Doriana's Catalyst for 98%. And then all my jewelry, I went ahead and hit with a Deafening Essence of Anger to get 30 plus increased fire damage. So here you see 34 on this ring, 31, 33 on here. And when I totaled it all up, it came out to around 600% increase. I've also got 40% from my helm here with the Uber Lab enchantment, 40% increased righteous fire damage. So for the beginning part of the series, I'm basically just going to use the Pain Attunement boost for the 1.3 damage, and I'm going to use this with 600% increased, you end up with a 7 times multiplier. And then, of course, the base damage here, it's 140 base damage. So we're going to basically take our 15,000, multiply by 1.4 here, multiply by 1.3 for Pain Attunement, and multiply by 7 for the increased increased damage. And whenever we total that all up, we go to if we go to PoEDB, which is whenever I started on this project, I went there to see kind of how this is going to work. And Vol has about 170,000 hit points and has a fire resistance of 45%. So once I went out and crunched the numbers after just running those 2 Vol runs just now, I end up calculating that with all these numbers exactly, you should do about 100,000 once you've got the Vol discipline, or about 77,000 before the Vol discipline, which if we look back, I did a little bit under half of his health and a little bit over half of his health in both of those shots. So that's pretty much exactly right, and the calculations seem to be coming out almost perfectly. I wasn't sure if PoEDB could actually be trusted for these things, but it looks like it can. So then the only thing we need to do now is get our about 100,000 damage we're doing up to above 170, 180,000 for his hit points. So the links I'm going to start with for the start of this video series are going to be just Conk Effect for 60% more multiplier, 50% more off of Elemental Focus, and then 44% more off of Controlled Destruction. And I'll also go ahead and throw some Fire Penetration on there. And just for quality of life, I'm going to start out with increased area of effect support. Once you get into the end game, I'll probably take that increased area of effect and actually add some more damage on there whenever I'm really scraping for extra damage when it gets up into the couple millions. And with that, we should be able to one-shot Vol, and here we go as a proof of concept for the rest of the series.
You trespass!